It was just another Monday at Bridgewater High. Or so I thought. The sky outside was a boring, washed-out gray. The kind of gray that makes you want to crawl back into bed and pull the covers over your head. I, Leo Martinez, trudged down the hallway, my backpack feeling like it was filled with bricks instead of books. The lockers slammed shut. The chatter of students echoed off the pale yellow walls. Everything was normal. Too normal. I hated Mondays. They always felt slow and stretched out like a piece of old chewing gum. I just wanted to get through the day, get through my classes, and get back home to my video games. My first class was history with Mr. Harrison. His room was always cold, even in the summer. It smelled like old paper and chalk dust. I slid into my usual seat in the back row, right by the window. I liked watching the trees sway in the wind. It was more interesting than hearing about ancient kings and forgotten wars. Mr. Harrison droned on, his voice a low hum that could put anyone to sleep. I doodled in my notebook, drawing little monsters and spaceships. The clock on the wall ticked loudly. Tick-tock, tick-tock. Each second felt like a minute. I sighed, resting my chin in my hand. This was going to be a long, long day. The fluorescent lights above buzzed with a faint, annoying sound. They flickered sometimes, casting weird shadows that danced across the room. I never paid them much attention before, but today, something felt different. There was a weird energy in the air. A strange quietness underneath the usual classroom noise. It was like the feeling you get right before a thunderstorm when the world holds its breath. I looked around at my classmates. They were all either half asleep or pretending to take notes. No one else seemed to notice. Maybe it was just me. Maybe I was just tired from staying up too late, but the feeling wouldn't go away. It was a little itch in the back of my mind, a tiny shiver that ran down my spine. I tried to shake it off. I focused on Mr. Harrison's lecture about some old dead pharaoh. He pointed at a map on the wall with a long wooden stick. The clock continued its slow, torturous ticking. I glanced at the window again. The gray sky seemed to be getting darker, pressing down on the school like a heavy blanket. I couldn't explain it, but I knew, deep down in my gut, that this wasn't going to be just another boring Monday. Something was wrong. Very wrong. That's when I heard it for the first time. It wasn't a loud noise. It was soft. So soft I thought I had imagined it. It was a whisper. It sounded like someone was breathing a single word right next to my ear. But there was no one there. To my left was the cold window pane. To my right, Maya was busy writing in her notebook, her brow furrowed in concentration. I turned my head, looking behind me. Just an empty corner where the old bookshelf stood, covered in a thin layer of dust. I must be hearing things, I told myself. It was probably just the wind whistling through a crack in the window frame. But then it happened again, a few minutes later. This time it was clearer, a faint, hissing sound, like air escaping from a tire, but with a voice. It seemed to come from the front of the classroom, near Mr. Harrison's desk. I looked up, but he was still talking about ancient Egypt, completely unaware. His back was to us as he wrote a date on the chalkboard. The chalk squeaked against the board, a sharp, unpleasant sound. But underneath it, I could still hear the whisper. It was a cold, airy sound. It made the hairs on my arms stand up. I felt a chill that had nothing to do with the room's temperature. I leaned over to Maya. "Did you hear that?" I whispered, my own voice barely a sound. She looked up from her notes, annoyed. "Hear what, Leo? Mr. Harrison's boring lecture?" She whispered back, rolling her eyes. "No," I said, a little louder than I meant to. A different sound, like a whisper. She just stared at me, a confused look on her face. "You're hearing things. Pay attention or you'll fail the pop quiz." I slumped back in my chair. A pop quiz? Great. As if the day wasn't bad enough. Now I was a weirdo who heard voices. Maybe Maya was right. Maybe my mind was playing tricks on me, but the whispers didn't stop. They came and went like a weak radio signal. Sometimes it sounded like it was right behind me. Other times, it seemed to come from the vents in the ceiling. It was never a clear word, just a breathy, ghostly sound that made my skin crawl. I couldn't focus on the quiz. I couldn't focus on anything. My eyes kept darting around the room, searching for the source of the sound. I looked at the vents, the bookshelf, the shadows in the corners. The whispers were everywhere and nowhere at the same time, and I was the only one who could hear them. The whispering stopped as the bell rang, its loud, jarring clang making me jump in my seat. Everyone rushed out of the classroom, eager for their next class. I gathered my books slowly, my heart still pounding in my chest. I was the last one to leave. As I walked towards the door, I glanced back into the empty room. That's when I saw it. In the far corner next to that dusty old bookshelf, there was a shadow. But it wasn't a normal shadow. It was darker than the others. It was tall and thin, shaped almost like a person standing perfectly still, but there was nothing there to cast it. The lights in the classroom were still on, buzzing faintly. The windows let in the dim afternoon light. There was no reason for a shadow like that to be there. It seemed to cling to the corner, a patch of pure darkness that seemed to soak up the light around it. I stood frozen in the doorway, my hand on the doorknob. My mind was screaming at me to run, to get out of there and not look back, but my feet felt like they were glued to the floor. I couldn't take my eyes off the shadow. It didn't move. It didn't waver. It just was. A silent, dark shape in an empty room. I took a hesitant step back into the room. "Hello," I called out, my voice sounding small and shaky. "Is anyone there?" The only answer was the hum of the lights and the frantic beating of my own heart. The shadow remained, unmoving. I squinted, trying to make sense of what I was seeing. Was it a trick of the light? A weird reflection? I took another step closer. The air near the corner felt colder. I could feel it on my skin, a deep, unnatural cold that seeped into my bones. It was the same cold I had felt when I heard the whispers. They were connected. I knew it. Suddenly, the shadow seemed to stretch. It elongated, its edges rippling like dark water. It grew taller, reaching towards the ceiling. It wasn't just a shadow anymore. It had depth. It had presence. It felt like it was watching me. I stumbled backward, tripping over my own feet. I scrambled to my feet and ran. I didn't stop running until I was in the crowded, noisy hallway surrounded by other students. I leaned against a locker, panting, trying to catch my breath. My heart felt like it was going to explode. I looked back at the classroom door. It was just a normal door, but I knew what was inside, and it was waiting. The rest of the day was a blur. I couldn't concentrate in any of my classes. English, math, science. The teacher's words all blended into a meaningless drone. All I could think about was the whisper in the shadow. Every time the lights flickered, I flinched. Every time I heard a soft noise, my head snapped around. I felt like I was being watched, a constant prickling sensation on the back of my neck that wouldn't go away. I kept looking over my shoulder, half expecting to see that tall, dark shadow standing right behind me. My friends asked me what was wrong. They said I looked pale, like I'd seen a ghost. I just shook my head and said I was feeling sick. It was during my last class of the day, biology, that I noticed something else strange. Mrs. Davison was taking attendance, calling out names from her list. "Liam Peterson," she called. Silence. "Liam Peterson," she repeated, looking up from her clipboard. She scanned the room. I looked around too. There was an empty desk in the third row, near the windows. Liam's desk. He was never absent. He had perfect attendance. He was one of those super smart kids who probably enjoyed coming to school. It was weird for him not to be here. Mrs. Davison just shrugged and marked him absent. But it wasn't just that he was absent. It was the desk itself. It looked wrong. It was perfectly neat. A textbook was open to the correct page. A pen was laid carefully beside it. It was as if Liam had been sitting there one moment and then just vanished. I stared at the empty chair. The afternoon sun cast a long shadow from the window frame across the desk. I got that cold feeling again, that same icy chill from Mr. Harrison's room. I couldn't shake the image of the shadow from my mind, the tall, thin shadow that stretched and grew. I thought back to Mr. Harrison's class. I tried to remember where everyone was sitting. My mind was a jumble of fear and confusion. But then a horrible thought hit me. I tried to picture the layout of the room. I remembered my desk in the back, Maya's desk next to mine, and then I remembered the desk in front of me, the one right in front of my own. It had been empty. I hadn't noticed it at the time. I was too busy doodling. Who sat there? I racked my brain trying to remember, then it hit me like a punch to the gut. It was Liam Peterson's assigned seat. He should have been there. School ended and, I couldn't get out of there fast enough. I practically ran to my locker, tossed my books inside, and headed for the exit. I really didn't want to spend another second in that building. The feeling of being watched was stronger than ever. It felt like 1,000 unseen eyes were following my every move. I pushed through the main doors and into the fresh air. The gray sky was still hanging overhead, but hey, at least I was outside. I started walking home, my pace fast. I kept looking over my shoulder, but the street was empty except for a few other students walking home. I told myself I was safe. I was out of the school, but then I remembered I had forgotten my history textbook. I groaned. I had a big test tomorrow. I had to go back. I stood at the edge of the school grounds arguing with myself. Just run in, grab it, and run out. It would take, what, 2 minutes? My heart hammered against my ribs. I didn't want to go back in there. I really didn't. But I didn't want to fail my test either. Taking a deep breath, I turned around and walked back towards the big brick building. The school looked different now that it was mostly empty. It looked darker, more menacing. The windows looked like vacant eyes staring out at me. I slipped back inside. The hallways were eerily quiet. The only sound was the echo of my own footsteps on the polished floor. I hurried to Mr. Harrison's room. The door was slightly ajar. I pushed it open and stepped inside. The room was dark, the only light coming from the hallway, and the cold was back. It was intense now, a biting, freezing cold that made me shiver violently. I fumbled for the light switch and flicked it on. The fluorescent lights buzzed to life, flickering erratically. My desk was in the back. I just needed to grab my book and leave. But as the light steadied, my eyes were drawn to the chalkboard at the front of the room. Mr. Harrison had erased it before we left. I was sure of it, but it wasn't empty now. There was writing on it, faint, messy letters, like they had been written with a finger through the chalk dust. It looked like a child had written it. The letters were shaky and uneven. I took a step closer to read what it said. It was one word, written over and over again. Help! And below that, in bigger, angrier letters, was a single chilling name, Liam. Liam! I whispered the name into the cold, empty room. The only reply was the hum of the lights. My blood ran cold. Liam was missing, and his name was written on the board, written in a way that looked desperate. I backed away from the chalkboard, my eyes wide with terror. I had to get out of there. I turned to run, but a sudden noise stopped me. It came from the old television set on a metal cart in the corner of the room, the one Mr. Harrison sometimes used to show us documentaries. It had switched on, all by itself. The screen was just static, a fuzzy black and white snowstorm. But there was a sound coming from the speakers. It wasn't just the normal hiss of static. There was something else mixed in with it, a voice. It was faint and distorted, buried under the sea of noise. I couldn't move. I was mesmerized by the screen, by the sound. I took a step closer, straining to hear. The voice was weak, filled with static, but it was there. It sounded like a boy's voice, a young boy. He was saying something. I leaned closer, my ear almost touching the speaker. The cold air in the room seemed to swirl around me, getting colder with every second. Can't see. The voice crackled through the static. So cold. It was broken, fragmented, but it was a voice, and it sounded terrified. It was the voice of someone lost, someone trapped. My heart was pounding so hard I could hear it in my ears. This couldn't be real. TVs don't just turn on by themselves. Voices don't just come out of the static, but it was happening. I was seeing it. I was hearing it. The voice was getting a little clearer now, fighting through the noise. Help! Me! It pleaded. The sound stretched and distorted. He won't let me leave. Who? I asked, my voice trembling. Who won't let you leave? The static on the screen seemed to swirl and shift. For a split second, I saw something in the noise. A face. A pale, terrified face of a boy with wide eyes. It was there for just a moment, and then it was gone, swallowed up by the swirling snow. It was Liam. It had to be. Before I could even process what I had seen, the TV switched off. Just like that. The screen went black. The voice was gone. The room was plunged back into a terrifying silence. All that was left was the cold, and the name on the chalkboard. I didn't grab my textbook. I ran. I fled from the classroom, from the school, and didn't look back. I ran all the way home, my lungs burning. I burst through my front door and slammed it shut, locking it behind me. I was safe. But the feeling of terror didn't leave me. I couldn't forget the writing on the board. I couldn't forget the voice in the static. I couldn't forget the face on the screen. Liam was in trouble. He was trapped in the school somehow, and something or someone was keeping him there. I knew I couldn't just ignore it. I had to do something. But what? Who would believe me? They would think I was crazy. The next day at school, I couldn't stop thinking about it. Liam was still absent. The police were at the school talking to the principal. They were asking students if they had seen him. I didn't say anything. What could I say? That I saw his ghost on a TV screen? They would send me to a psychiatrist. I decided to do my own investigation. I needed to know more about the school, about its history. There was only one place to go for that: the library. The school library was my least favorite place. It was always so quiet, and the librarian, Miss Albright, was ancient. She had been working at Bridgewater High since the dawn of time, or so the rumors said. Miss Albright was sitting at her desk, stamping books with a loud, rhythmic thud. She looked up at me over her glasses as I approached. "Can I help you, young man?" she asked, her voice dry and crackly like old paper. I was wondering about the history of the school, I said, trying to sound casual. "I'm doing a project." It was a lame excuse, but it was the best I could come up with. Her eyes narrowed slightly. "A project? On what specifically?" she asked, her gaze making me feel like a bug under a microscope. "On strange things," I said, my voice barely a whisper. "Has anything bad ever happened here?" A strange look passed over her face. It was a flicker of something I couldn't quite read. Fear? Sadness? She was silent for a long moment. The only sound was the ticking of the large clock on the library wall. "Schools are old places," she finally said, her voice low. "They have many stories. Most are forgotten." She stood up and beckoned for me to follow her. She led me to a back corner of the library, to a dusty section filled with old yearbooks and town records. "There was a boy," she said, her back to me as she ran a finger along the spines of the old books. "A long time ago, before this building was a high school. It was an orphanage then." She paused. "A boy disappeared from his room. They never found him." "What was his name?" I asked, my voice shaking. Miss Albright turned around slowly. Her face was pale, her expression grim. "His name was Thomas," she said softly. "He was a quiet boy, always getting picked on by the headmaster, a cruel man. The headmaster always said Thomas was a troublemaker, that he must have run away. But some people whispered other things. They said the headmaster was the one who made him disappear." She looked me straight in the eyes. "They say Thomas's spirit never left this place. They say he still wanders the halls looking for a friend, looking for someone to help him." My mind was racing. A ghost named Thomas, a cruel headmaster. Could this be what was happening? Was Thomas the one whispering to me? Was he the one trying to warn me about something? Or was he the one who had taken Liam? The thought sent a fresh wave of fear through me. "Why are you telling me this?" I asked Miss Albright. She gave me a sad smile. "Because you have the look," she said. "The look of someone who has seen something they can't explain. I've seen it before. Thomas only shows himself to certain people. Be careful, Leo. He's not just a sad spirit, he's lonely. And lonely spirits sometimes do desperate things to keep a friend from leaving." I left the library feeling more confused and terrified than ever. The final bell of the day rang. I walked slowly through the emptying hallways, my head spinning. I had to go to the bathroom before I left. I pushed open the heavy door to the boys' restroom near the gym. It was empty. The lights flickered above the long row of sinks and mirrors. I splashed some cold water on my face, trying to clear my head. I looked up into my own reflection in the mirror. My face was pale, my eyes wide with fear. I looked terrible. But then, something changed. My reflection flickered, like the static on the TV screen. For just a second, the face looking back at me wasn't my own. It was someone else, a boy with dark, hollow eyes and pale, translucent skin. He looked sad and lost. It was the face from the library's old photos. It was Thomas. He was looking out from the mirror, right at me. And then his lips moved. He didn't make a sound, but I could read the words clearly on his lips. "Stay with me." My heart stopped. I stumbled backward, away from the mirror. My reflection returned to normal, but I couldn't unsee the face. The ghost was in the mirror. He was everywhere. I ran out of the bathroom, my mind screaming, "Stay with me." The words echoed in my head. That's what Miss Albright had warned me about. He was lonely. He wanted a friend. He had taken Liam to be his friend, and now he wanted me. I had to tell someone. The police, my parents, anyone. I raced down the main hallway towards the principal's office. It was getting dark outside, and the hallway was dim. Most of the lights were off now. As I ran, I felt the air grow cold around me. That familiar, bone-chilling cold. He was here. He was following me. I glanced over my shoulder, and I saw him. At the far end of the long hallway, a figure was standing. It wasn't the tall, dark shadow from before. It was a boy. A pale, shimmering outline of a boy in old-fashioned clothes. Thomas. He just stood there watching me. He raised a hand and pointed, not at me, but at the door to Mr. Harrison's classroom. A silent order. He wanted me to go in there. I shook my head and kept running. I wasn't going to be his next friend. I wasn't going to disappear like Liam. I was going to get out. I reached the end of the hallway, my hand reaching for the glass door of the main office. I could see the principal inside, talking on the phone. I was almost there, just a few more feet. Suddenly, a whisper echoed all around me, seeming to come from the walls themselves. "Don't leave me!" It was a child's voice, filled with a terrible sadness and a chilling anger. The lights in the hallway flickered violently and then went out, plunging me into complete darkness. I screamed. I fumbled for the office door, my hands sliding against the cold glass. I couldn't find the handle. And then I felt it, an icy cold hand grabbing my arm. It was freezing, the touch burning like dry ice. I tried to pull away, but the grip was impossibly strong. It pulled me back, away from the office door, dragging me down the dark hallway. I struggled, I kicked, I screamed, but no one could hear me. The cold enveloped me. I was being pulled back towards that classroom, back toward the whispers and the shadows. Back to him, to Thomas. He had found a new friend, and this time, he wasn't going to let go. I was going to be the newest ghost of Bridgewater High.